Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to You've Championed Yourself. Who are you? I'm Chris Ferguson, your host. It has always been a dream of mine to showcase ordinary people doing extraordinary things in their life and for others. Those who've taken their dreams and their ideas and then turned it into their reality. As they reach beyond their personal struggles, their personal pains, and their traumas, where so many give up, so many lose hope. There are the few who can walk through their obstacles and challenges. They don't know where it's going to take them. They don't know where they're going to end up. They just trust enough not to give up, to do the follow through in personal life, their career, and in relationships. This is what I call a champion in life. Today, I have an amazing lady. Her name's Carol Banayos, and I'm excited to interview her because she calls herself the archaeologist of mind, body, and soul. And I am just like, okay, let's find out what's going on here. Let's welcome Carol to the podcast.
Hello, Chris. Thank you so much for taking the time and having me as a guest in your show. I'm very excited and thank you.
I'm honored. I'm honored. I saw the things that you had written about on our interview form, and I thought this is going to be an amazing conversation. I'm so excited because I'm about getting different perspectives, different understandings, those conversations that people don't want to talk about. I'm like, let's talk about them. Let's bring them to the forefront. Let's discuss them. So this way it's not like, oh, well, you can't talk about that. It's like, no, we can talk about anything here. So I normally ask my people that are here that's being interviewed to start with their backstory. And what was that point in life that made you decide this isn't for me? I'm something more than just this. Can we talk about that?
Yes, definitely. The point in time in my life when I realized that is actually when I was working in the government as an HR consultant. I remember it was a year or two in my career, and I was sitting in a retirement party, and my coworkers were conversing towards each other. And one of my coworkers said to the other, "Hey, that's going to be you in 25 years." And he was totally fine with it. But something in my body contracted. And I felt like I was in prison. I'm like, this is not for me. I need to do something about it. And then I started like at that moment, I woke the fuck up, basically.
I love it.
Yeah, I realized that I was stuck in conformity because as we're growing up, we're taught in society you gotta go to school, go to university, and get a job. And I did exactly that. I went to university for 7 years, got 2 degrees, and got my dream job. In the government. That's what I was working towards, but I was miserable. And the fact is, when you follow those certain norms, you don't really even know yourself. So I just kind of dived in deep once I woke the fuck up and started to look at and investigate, like, who is Carol? What does Carol want to do? And I took, a risk, and I stepped into the direction of investing in myself and letting myself unfold and giving myself the permission to do that, because in my life, I was willing at that moment to take a risk, but what I was not willing to risk was being in a job for the rest of my life that I was miserable in, just because I made a lot of money and the status and recognition that came with it.
How did that, when you decided to leave there, were you concerned about where you were going? Did you have your focus before you left, or did you find that along the journey?
It was actually a very tumultuous time because when I decided to quit, a lot of people like, Carol, you're crazy. You're permanent employee. You have all these benefits, but I didn't really care about that. And because a lot of people in my environment, they're miserable, but no one wanted to take action. And I just thought of two things that I love to do. I want to go to Australia, and I wanted to get into real estate. So I decided to get a visa and go to Australia, but things changed and I went into the direction of real estate. But after that, my life has been very tumultuous ever since then.
So how have you been transitioning through that? Have you reached your purpose yet, your passion yet?
Yes, in the process of making myself an object of study, I connected with my intuition and my divine nature, and knew that I was placed on this earth to help raise human consciousness, to help people realize their greatest and fullest potential while being their true authentic self. And at the core of it is to be able to do things and create things to reduce human suffering. Because I believe a lot of time people are suffering in silence, and they do not know how to um, use certain tools to release those pains and traumas that exist within them.
You talked about the object of study to reduce suffering. How would one go about that? Because most people are in denial. Most people accept their bad behaviors and bad behaviors of others. And so, how do they get that clarity to be that object of study? Because most people can't be that real, raw, and rare.
Yeah, I would. It's not easy. It's a very challenging thing to do because so many people don't want to be left alone with their thoughts because they may be disgusted of who they may find out themselves to be. But what I want to say is that you are not your thoughts, you're not your feelings, you're not your body. All those different aspects of you are just aspects of how the human being functions in society. But in your core, you're a divine being made in the image and likeness of the creator God. And the only way to kind of begin to learn to study yourself is to create that empty space in your calendar. You need to time for self-reflection, you need time to meditate, you need to be in peace and silence, because if you are in the world of distraction, constantly scrolling through social media, constantly be on Netflix and constantly being busy, where in that time are you allowed to kind of sit with your thoughts? And you have to have the courage to kind of look within. I know it's scary. I've been there, I got down my knees and cried. It's been so painful. But at the end of the day, I'm willing to go through that pain and suffering in that moment. What I'm not willing to do is let that pain and suffering control the rest of my life. I would like to release that. So essentially, you're going to have to weigh the pros and benefits, because there is benefits from wanting to be misery, because misery loves company. But there's another aspect that's so beautiful when you allow yourself to be free of all these things that kept you a prisoner.
I'm totally loving that. You wrote a book on this object of study to reduce suffering, didn't you?
Yes.
What is it called?
It's exactly called that. It's called You as an Object of Study, a way to reduce your human suffering. And in that book, I kind of share my stories and experiences so you can actually clearly see how I made myself an object of study and all the tumultuous experiences that I had. So a person can relate and maybe get triggered, or, feel some resistance. And is that trigger and resistance, maybe that's an inkling for like, oh, this is something that I need to investigate and explore. And at the end of the day, if I'm willing to make myself an object of study and release myself from past traumas and pain and limiting beliefs, I believe anyone can do it. It's just having that fortitude and courage to be able to just dive deep.
And I think, and I love what you're saying, but I also think sometimes you have to reach out to somebody who can see it from a different perspective, because our perspective is like, I'm fine, I'm doing great, I'm making choices that I want to do, and this is how I am. But is it really how you are?
Not necessarily, because at the end of the day, there's so many different identities that people think they are. Like I would just share this example that I wrote in my book, and my teacher told me, which is a good analogy, that we come into this earth as a plain pine tree, and during Christmas, we get decorated with all these, decorations, bells, whistles, the popcorn, all that jazz. And then we start to identify as that Christmas tree that's decorated versus the pine tree. So when you look at it in that aspect, all those decorations, that's your identity, your beliefs, your thoughts, your perceptions, your house, your partner, and all those other things. You identify that. But when you strip all away those things and you look at the crux of it, the inner being, I'll go back to what I said earlier. You are a divine being of light and love, and you are connected to the God, the source, the creator. And I think when you're able to remove all those decorations from your being, then you can actually see more of that light. But if you have all these different veils, all these different things that are blocking your vision, and you're filtering, that's the way you're filtering your life, then you're not going to be able to see. And you need to peel back those layers in order for you to see and get in touch with that inner divinity.
I love that. I actually speak onto my clients about taking their mask off.
Yeah.
We have a mask for everything, and
Mm,
for every excuse we have a mask. And
yes.
when you get beyond the mask and get down to the raw core, that's when you can have reflection. And
Mm,
I think I love the way you said it. I really do. So how do you spoke about raising human consciousness. How
mm.
do you do that? How would you do that? Because I'm sure there's other people that do it their different ways, but how would you do that?
Well, I would like to give an example of a discussion I had with my friends, or the video I recorded, and it's in regards to enlightenment. Because a lot of people think enlightenment, it's all about that Buddhist way and all those other aspects. But how I like to think of enlightenment is being able to lessen the load. You know,
Mm,
and being able to release all those hurts, those pains, that ridicule, and past traumas. And when you're able to release all of those things, then you become lighter. And guess what? When you're lighter, then you'll be able to vibe higher.
mhm,
Because when you think about certain feelings such as pain and things that feel good, when you're thinking about things that are negative, that brings you into a lower vibration. And when you release all of those aspects from your being, then you can, you think more positively, you think more of unconditional love. And when I say this now, if you would have told Carol years ago you want to operate in unconditional love, you'll be like, "What the fuck are you talking about? What's unconditional? You're on crack." You know what I mean? But it's almost once you go down this personal and spiritual development journey, that's almost the only way that you can think of growing and evolving. So when you're not being pulled down by these anchors of negative thinking, and you let that go, then you are automatically light, you're enlightened, and you are raised to a higher vibration because you are, of light and love, of positivity. Not disregarding that you won't feel these emotions, but
mhm.
when you operate at a higher level, when these emotions comes, I like to call them as, visitors in your being, in your temple, not permanent residents, and you need to let them leave, not dwell on them. Less.
I love that, and it's true, it's true, and a lot of it has to do with some of the forgiveness of ourselves,
Mm,
and that's huge, and it's absolutely correct. It's a way of connecting with ourselves on a solar level,
mm,
so that you can get to your soul and say, "Hey, listen, that protected me when I was a child, or that was my protection at that point. Thank you, but it's not my I don't need it anymore. I'm stronger, I'm better, I'm me."
mm. Yeah, and I feel called to kind of give an example in regards to being more lighter. Like, say if you are wanting to operate with love and peace in your hearts, and you're constantly thinking about negative things like judgmental, like I hate this person, that person's a bitch, that guy's an asshole, or I hate the government and all these other things. So that is a misalignment. How can you feel love and peace in your heart when all you feel is trash internally? And you're
Mhm.
right, you have to be able to look at those things and release it, because you're going to be in misalignment and your vibration will be pulled down versus being lifted up.
Forgiveness was a huge thing in my life as a
Mm.
child. My brother was killed by a drunk driver,
I'm sorry to hear about.
and there was no justice. So the thing was, is it that led me down a pathway for people to help them get justice
Mm,
by being the underdog. And so in doing that, um, it brought out an authentic self.
mm,
But I want to talk about how you see authentic self, because it's an individual understanding. But when you can get to that authentic self, that's also enlightenment.
yes, and what you said about forgiveness, that was the core of and pillar of the foundation that allowed myself to be authentic. Because when you think about, people are like, well, why do you need to forgive yourself? When you become aware of all the thoughts that you think about yourself,
Mm.
if you were to talk like that to your friends or anybody, you wouldn't have any other friends. So
Oh.
once I was able to kind of come to realizations like, whoa, I actually hate myself. I need to forgive myself for all the mean things I think and say to myself. And once I did that, like I had like a crying breakdown for like days and days. And that allowed me to be able to forgive other people. And I think with this authenticity, it's about being real, it's about being raw and being honest with yourself. Because if you can say that you're honest to others, but at the end of the night, you're the one that lays your head on the pillow and you know exactly what you're thinking and doing. And I think when it comes to this authenticity too, I'm okay when people don't understand me. I'm okay when people don't like me. I just know deep in my being, if I'm being sincere and I know I'm a good person inside, then it doesn't really matter to me what people think or say about me. And I think that's really being authentic and not being slighted by what other people do and the comparisons that you see. And that you have to be really truly blessed and grateful for who you are as an individual and your own uniqueness.
I agree wholeheartedly. I truly, truly agree, because in the forgiveness, I had to forgive myself for the thoughts I was having against this man who murdered my brother by hitting him with his car. And I was an abandoned kid. I was a street kid growing up. I'm beyond my control. And it was me already being a mom and saying, if I go avenge this guy for what he did to my brother, I'm going to end up abandoning my child like I was. And so that was the light switch for me to say, I gotta think things out here. I'm not on the right level. I'm not on the wavelength that I should be at, because how can I be loving to this innocent child and then throw her into hell because I'm emotionally unstable?
Yeah.
And so I agree with everything you said, but being authentic, it is the removing of the mask, but
Mhm,
it's also being accountable, having that internal integrity and
mhm,
responsibility for your actions. And I actually see it as, if you make a mistake, that's fine. But if you repeat that mistake, that's a decision.
mhm.
There's a difference.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I definitely agree with you because, in the personal development industry, it's all about speaking positively, thinking positively, but it's not always about that. You have to, it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to, feel down these days, but there's something more important than having a positive mindset. And it's about having that character and values, because how are you going to think positively when you don't have a guiding compass to direct those thoughts?
Mhm,
So you can think positively, but then you get into a dealing and you fuck someone over, or you cause all this drama. So how
mhm.
is that really being in alignment? And I think those values and characters of integrity, honesty, loyalty, ambition, grit, those are not of a bygone era. I think that's what makes an individual great, and a country and world great. And I think we've lost that. And I call that there's a lot of moral decay, and we need to build up the morality again so
Mhm.
we can learn how to treat other people nicely and keep our words and follow through and be in total alignment.
You're speaking my soul. You're speaking
Mhm.
my soul, because I'm all about that too. Because it's not that I'm better than anybody else. I was so far beyond the tracks, I couldn't see the tracks to get up to be that
Yeah.
ghetto kid, because I was so far beyond the tracks. And with that, you write about, or you talk about uncovering your genius,
Mm.
because I know what my genius meant to me. Can we talk about this? But beyond the tracks, you don't let that define who you become.
Mm.
You don't let that be define. You were surviving. You're 100% surviving. So now let's talk about how you can uncover your genius, because I'm all about getting kids education.
Oh, yes, and I want you're talking about, the ghetto, I grew up in a rough part of town as well, and, in the basement in the household that I was in, my dad had a mental illness, so we were physically abused as we were growing up, so I didn't know how to express myself, so how I would express myself was in my fist and not my words, so, that continued on to adulthood until I was able to learn more of being able to speak and be nicer and be more my femininity rather than my masculinity. But in regards to uncovering your genius, there is an aspect that I can do. So when you mentioned before, I'm an archaeologist of the mind, body, and soul. What that essentially means is I can dive deep into an inner being and uncover their traumas, when it happened, and how it affects them in adulthood, and even uncover things that they may not even know because they push it so down deep into their subconscious, and as well as identify their genius and their purpose in life. So, since I made myself an empty vessel, so to speak, then God and Spirit allows for those messages and intuitive and ideas to flow through me so I can see all those different aspects. But in regards to you, any individuals or children out there wanting to discover their genius, again, is taking the time to make yourself a study. So if you don't make yourself an object of study, how is it you're going to know what you like, what you dislike, and to make the dedication to be able to build your craft? And the thing is, when people talk about purpose and passion, sometimes you take a direction, and intuitively you have to go that way, but it brings you totally beyond what you initially thought. And that's what my course was. But I think as long as you develop that habit of taking time for yourself and
Mhm.
giving yourself the opportunity to think and test things out, then that will lead you to your genius, and think about things that you absolutely love that you can do effortlessly. Sometimes you take those things for granted, but
Mhm.
other people say like, whoa, that's a genius, I can't even do that. When I look at my friends, they're so amazing in computers, I'm like, whoa, that's alien language, you're a genius. But it's and they look at me and they're like, "Oh, how can you come up with so many ideas and write and everything like that?" But it comes natural. So
Mhm.
everyone is their own genius in their own right, and I believe that God has implanted a seed in each individual that is meant for them to be expressed in the world using their own genius. And I think people just need to know that they're enough and that they're capable of doing so. And I love the fact that you want to help the younger generation, because I think that it's so important, because I think the current educational system as it stands right now, it doesn't breed and pick out for intelligence. It is for complacency. Like, learn the subject, raise your hand when I tell you, and if you fall out of that box, then you have a mental illness. You know what I mean? You have ADHD, or here, take a pill. And I think it's really important to be able to grow and develop our younger generations, because they are our leaders. They are to continue the growth and evolution of this planet and this earth. So we need to give them the proper tools to flourish, as well as the right mentality and values and characters, because in totality, that will make them a great human being.
I agree. I went into law enforcement after my brother was murdered. That was how I was guided to help the underdog people, humanity, get justice as much as I could as an officer. And I was in law enforcement for 40 years.
Well,
I When you came out and said that you talked about your story and said, this guy retired, and you go, yeah, that's going to be you in 25 years. I never thought of it that way.
mm,
And 21 years of my 40 years was for troubled youth. I dealt with gang members in Miami-Dade and Fort Lauderdale. And then I went to an alternative high school, and there was 3,000 students. It was very diverse, and there was a lot of kids with no support systems. And even though I was the chief working at this high school for the school board police, I wanted to make sure that kids understood the value of an education, to
mm,
take advantage of that education. So I've been supporting kids for a long, long time and breaking up the fights. And I'm that girl that jumped into a gang fight where there was 12 guys fighting and just started throwing bodies to different sides. So I was one of those kind of kids. None of them knew I was a street kid. None of them knew I grew up in an orphanage. So I had the advantage on it to be able to counsel them. And that was where my biggest gift was.
mm. I love how you share that, because when that title that I got for my book, "You as an Object of Study," I actually got that idea when I was in prison.
Mm.
And and that was another turning point in my life, because I trusted my brother, and I put a business underneath my name for him, and I was innocent, but all these things happened, and I ended up in jail. And it was really challenging for me to go through it. But I remember I was in my jail cell, the door was locked, and I was leaning like up against the wall, and a voice spoke to me, and it says, "You as an object of study." And I didn't really understand it at that time, so it prompted me to start writing down all these different things, but I didn't understand the the depth of it until I got out of
Mhm.
prison. And it's like, whoa, this life that I lived, it allowed me and to or forced me to make myself an object of study in
Mhm.
order to help other people. And I think, another thing that I'd like to add is that you cannot teach an experience. My soul brother said that to me, and I was like, whoa, that's so profound. You can't teach an experience. So when people
Mhm.
say you have strength and a positive mindset, it's only when you're in those situations when you are able to say, yes, I actually have a strong positive minded, I'm a strong person. And I was able to exercise those right when I was in prison because physically my body was in prison, but mentally I was not. So it
Mhm.
allowed me to adapt to those surroundings. So you cannot teach an experience. You have to go through it to be able to
Mhm.
experience what a certain thing means.
Absolutely agree. I started out as a police dispatcher and a matron. I'm the one that processed everybody that went to jail as far as the females go. And then I went to work out at a penitentiary, a men's penitentiary. So I worked in a prison. I understand the setting. But
Yeah.
the one thing that I understood, it was not my job to make these people's lives in prison harder than what they've been sentenced to. That's not my job. Their job is to do their time, to pay their for their crime or whatever they were accused of and found guilty of, and be able to change, have the ability to change because there's all kinds of options to do. I honor you. I knew before you got here that the honor in this was up at a parallel that you weren't going to know.
Mm,
And I love the fact that, and I did it. I worked at a jail also, and I never had a complaint. I had everybody coming to me, the inmates coming to me, telling me things that they wouldn't tell anybody else because they knew I would hold their confidentiality.
mm,
However, if there was somebody that needed something, I didn't have any problem getting it for them.
mm,
But I will still hold you accountable to the rules because I wrote the rules. I
mm,
was the policy and procedure queen. I was the backup to HR. I was the chief of security. I was the unit manager. So I had all these titles, and it was like, okay. However, they're human beings.
mm,
And when you see everybody as a human being, and it's not about their behaviors, it's about your behaviors. And it's not about me fixing anybody, it's about me being a role model to show people there's options you can do.
mm,
And I thank you for being vulnerable enough to share that here. I have interviewed several former felons, several convicted, and they're now doing something in their life to make a difference. And that's what I built this podcast about, is showing how people, ordinary people, can do crazy, stupid things and then realize that's not the time.
mm,
So the fact is, you know, trusting your family members is not a good thing to do. I say that because I didn't end up in jail, but it came damn close. I'm just saying it
mm,
came damn close. So I walked that mile. I was a street kid.
mhm,
I lived on the streets for a year and a half after I ran away from the orphanage. And the fact is you don't survive on the streets and eat on the streets unless you're stealing food and, panhandling, doing all these things and breaking laws. But I was trying to survive. So I understand that. I'm grateful they didn't have cell phones back in that day. Okay. Because Lord knows what I could have been brought in on. So the fact is again, it's not about what you did. It's about how you didn't allow it to define you. Step through the threshold and decide to do something else with your life.
yeah. And thank you for being a blessing, and being you and serving those people like you do in prison, because I know how it is in there, and the thing is that a lot of the guards when I was in prison knew I wasn't there. They knew the situation. So and how I was as being in coaching and in my profession, I was that person in prison for a lot of the inmates, because a lot of the time they have no one to really love them, to listen, to hear, or help them, get out of prison by writing letters. So I did a lot of those things to help those people in there, because it's like, if I'm capable of doing that, then I'm going to do that to help them progress or help them deal with their feelings or emotions, because I've been able to do it. And I think the one thing that I've learned, yeah, you say don't trust your family members, but the biggest lesson that I've learned through all this things that I went through, it was like a 6-year battle, a legal battle, and being in jail for almost a year. And the thing is, I had to come to terms of being naive,
Mm,
and I had to learn discernment. And I realized that you can act in a golden rule, treat others how you want to be treated,
Mhm,
but others will not treat you that way. You can't expect that. You can't
mhm,
expect other people are going to have a kind heart and treat you how you want to be treated. And when I first got arrested, I that was another turning point for me because I was like, "Is this what happens when I help people?" You know what I mean? I thought to myself, "I never want to help anybody ever again." Like I
mhm,
was almost having this hardened heart that like became really angry and very like uh, just it just didn't feel right. But since I know what my purpose is, and luckily God is there and my spirit guides to guide me, that's not who I was. So I
mhm,
just had to really come to terms that I have to build this discernment and know who who and what I want to spend my time and energy on.
mhm.
Because time and energy is your most precious resources, and not everyone deserves to have access to you. And it's not just talk egotistically. It's just a matter of fact. Some people are meant to be in your life, and some people aren't. And you have to have the courage and boundaries to say no. You know what I mean? Say no, because sometimes if you love so much, you just want to help everyone, but people first need to help themselves.
They do, and sometimes they need that guidance and support, and I love the fact that you're there helping people because, let's be honest, the prison system is like a big babysitting center, and a lot of stuff goes amok. And then you get people with, I'm not even sure it was mental illness because the facility I worked at was 65% sex offenders.
Mm,
And so it was a whole, and being males, it was a whole different understanding. And I was one of three females that worked at the facility at the time. It was back in the day that women weren't working in men's corrections. But I've always had that masculine part to me. So it was like, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. But I remember one day I was working control and this inmate walked up to me and said, I shouldn't be in here. And I said, oh, really? Why? And he says, oh, I had an epileptic seizure and I don't remember molesting those 4 year olds.
mm,
And I looked at him. And at the time, this was like over 30 years ago. Um, I told him, I explained to him, I said, well, the last thing that's going to get erect in a seizure, epileptic seizure, is your penis. And to get the F away from me, because if you're lucky, I'm in this control center and can't leave because I'd take you out myself.
mm.
And that was my emotion as a mom and as a female, and stealing the innocence of a child. That I'm a street kid. I know what it's like not to be wanted and loved. And here you're trying to convince me this is your excuse for doing your bad behaviors. And at that point, I didn't have that understanding. I wasn't judging, but I was having that emotional reaction. And I just said, you need to get the F away from me right now.
Mhm.
And so the word got out there that, you know what, I'm not the one to approach. And I don't regret saying what I said to him because it actually helped me in the long run,
Mhm.
because I didn't have to deal with all the other inmates trying to do their, they try to take an officer down, get them to compromise themselves. Well, none of them knew I was a street kid. None of them knew that I had been through what I'd been through. So I'm like this iron steel clad female you can't get anything over. And it was crazy. It was just crazy. So the fact is like I said, most people don't have an understanding, and I agree with you of what happens behind bars. And
Yeah,
I, like you, never said anything, but
yeah,
I won every fight I fought.
yeah, but it's like in there you get tested in ways that you thought possible, and the thing is, like, in my mind, it's like you are, like, I was exposed to so many different individuals, and I felt like I would have PTSD with all the stories that I've heard.
Mhm.
It seems like such a crazy movie, you know what I mean? These people are actually living it. And so at the end of the day, I was even more blessed to kind of be like, okay, I'm in here for a reason. It's just to serve others and, and also get tested because there's some aspects of you where I almost got into a fight and I wanted to do all these other things and aspects of who I was when I was younger, when I quit
Mhm.
my stuff. But I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna compromise myself. I do not want to be in a hole. I was in the hole when I first got arrested. I don't want to be there again. And people cannot comprehend like when I from the court being locked in a concrete room for 10 hours or longer. You
Mhm.
don't know what that does to an individual. Like, I could have, like, if I hadn't been practicing meditation for, like, over a decade, I would probably have banged my head against the wall and, like, yelled and screamed like other people. But luckily I was able to meditate for the majority of the time there, because it can make you go pretty nuts.
Well, not only that, but most people, like you said earlier, are not used to isolation
Mm,
for themselves to quiet the mind.
yeah.
And when you get in a situation, and most people don't realize is that in prison, there's people out there that have different thought processes.
Mm,
And if they see you succeeding, who do you think you are? We're going to show you. And people get jumped, people get hurt, people get stabbed, people get killed. It happens because you're again dealing with a diverse population
mhm,
of people who want to take shortcuts in life
mm,
ordinarily. Not you're the rarity of it. And what most people don't realize that 1% of the people in prison nationwide are innocent. 1%.
yeah.
Everybody else is in there is guilty. So when you're the minority because you're innocent in there and you're dealing with all these people with criminal element minds, you're just an obstacle to them. You're a conquer to them. So they're going to one challenge you to see how much of a badass you are. Two, can you defend yourself? And when they always get shocked and they're like, well, she was so quiet. Well, that's why they tell you, watch out for the quiet ones, because they have a story
Yeah.
that you're not aware of that's going to come out and you're going to be sorry.
Mm. Yes, and I love that you say that, because I do get a lot of that misconception, because I am a loving, caring, compassionate, kind person, but the extreme side of me, of what I went through when I was a child, it's sleeping inside of me. So any situation can wake up that beast, but it's up to me to exercise when that beast is going to be used. And I was tested so many times in prison. Like, I literally got in so much fights and stuff like that. But again, that's with the ability to have that strength to exercise your
Mhm.
ability to be able to step back and pause and be able to analyze the situation, because there's costs and benefits to everything. I'm like, do I want to go in a hole? Fuck no. You know what I mean? I'd rather be in my cell. You know what I mean? So,
Mhm.
because it's just that instant gratification that you can have, and with that adrenaline, with getting into fights and putting up your
Mhm.
fists. But when you go through this process, it's like, it's not even worth my time um, to even think about that or exercise that, because it's not worth it. That's
Right.
not who I am anymore.
Right. And I love that because that just shows a transition.
Mm,
So the thing is that I want to talk about the inner shit holding you hostage.
mm,
I love that statement. I actually know what mine was.
mm,
And in overcoming it, I don't have the triggers that you talk about that, that beast. I mean, that person's still there and it can step up for anybody to help anybody. If I see somebody doing something that's harming another person, I don't mind. I step into it. I have for 40 years. I don't mind doing it because that's not how humanity should be treating humanity.
mm.
And that's how I see it. So it has nothing to do with color, has nothing to do to race. It has nothing to do with any of that. It has to do with being a human being. But I love how do you get, because, well, what in prison, I was a hostage negotiator. So the thing is that's why when you said it, the inner shit holding you hostage, I said, we've got to talk about this
Mm.
because I love this. Can you expound on that?
Yeah. So what I mean about your inner shit that's holding you hostage is things that you are not even aware of, that are deep down into your subconscious. So there could be scripts that are happening in the background that you are not aware of. And I'll kind of share one of my experiences. Since I was growing up in a household that was very abusive, I've never really learned the capacity to deal with my emotions. And so in adulthood, I went into relationships with men who are emotionally unavailable and weren't at the caliber that I thought at that time I thought I deserved. And then I
Mhm.
came and point to one of my relationships where I actually wanted to take my life, because
Mhm.
in my mind I was so helpless that the only way I can think of is like, okay, the only way I can leave this relationship, I can't break up anymore because I've done that so many times. So I might as well just like kill myself. You know what I mean? That was my rationality. But luckily the relationship ended before it did. And in that moment, I made a statement to myself, which was so profound, and I realized how negative it was. It was that I never want to lose my integrity, my identity, myself ever again. And
Mhm.
this is before I started dealing my traumas and my past limiting beliefs and all that inner shit that I did. So guess what? That wasn't imprinted in my being. And then
Mhm.
I filtered all my experiences in life, based on that. So anytime any guy wanted to come near me, I would sabotage it. And but
Mm.
this was happening automatically and I did not know. So it was keeping me hostage. And it wasn't until years, like a decade or so later, just no, actually 4 years ago, that I realized that I was being held hostage with my inner shit. Because at that moment, like I met someone and it broke the concrete between my subconscious and my conscious mind, and I realized it. And I broke down. It brought me down to my knees, and it hurt so bad. I thought I was gonna die. And I realized, what I wanted was to attract a divine right relationship. That's what I wanted. But internally, that wasn't the script that was running. So I
Mhm.
had to be able to deal with all of those unconscious beliefs of that, you know, lack of self-esteem and, being cheated on, because all that stuff like ruminates in the background. And
Mhm.
so when I was able to come to terms with it and be like, shit, man, yeah, I was hostage with those thoughts. But then in addition to that, having the courage and the determination to work past that, to not let that be my story, to not keep me prisoner of who I thought. So I had, and I realized I saw this couple. And I'm like, whoa, that would be an amazing kind of experience to have with someone. But I had to work on my inner shit because you attract what you are, not what you
Mhm.
want. So
Yes,
you
or
have
what you're focusing on.
what you're focusing on, and you
Mhm.
have to become a vibrational match. So I knew I had to get rid of all this internal shit so I can be aligned with attracting my divine right relationship. And,
Right.
and I think a lot of the times when I wrote my book, in the beginning of my book, I have a quote that so many years in education, but yet no one has taught us how to live ourselves. So when you think about the moment of conception to kindergarten to high school to
Mhm.
university, getting married and have kids, where in that span of time did you learn to study yourself? Probably not. And you get to the point where you don't know who the fuck you are. You don't know why you're sad. You don't know why you're depressed. You do not know all of these X, Y, and Z's.
Mhm.
And and you're held hostage because you're not taking the time to realize what has been the root cause of why I feel sad, why I feel depressed, why I feel anxiety, you know?
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
once you're able to finally have the courage, then you won't be hostage anymore. You'll be free.
I get that. I get that. The biggest thing that I've seen, and I was born, I was 10 years old in 69. So I've been around for a while, but in the 50s and the starting of the 60s, it was like the government was tearing down the family units. And it progressed through the 70s, through the 80s, through the 90s. It was all tearing down those core beliefs, those integrity, those understanding of loving other people, that these are supposed to be your family. And so now we've made children's lives as disposable as the garbage.
Mm,
And so when you do that and you make them have no value or no worth, people don't care that they go missing. People don't care that they're being trafficked. People want to just blame and point a finger instead of understanding that they're being groomed, they're being taught, they're being manipulated, they are naive.
mm,
And like all kids, we all think we know better than the adults. We all think that you don't understand because you're old. It's different now. It's human trafficking is the new slavery
mm,
when you think about it. But how many people in their childhood get in groomed that this is okay, or groomed that this behavior is okay? And in the 60s, I was a product of society norms
mhm,
because people weren't getting divorces then. It was not acceptable. And the Catholic Church told my mother, we'll help you. In February, I turned 8. In May, I had my first Holy Communion. And in June, I became an orphan. And
mm.
my mother willingly drove away.
Wow.
So the fact was, is dad's Native American. He's drunk. She's physically violent. It was a tumultuous life as a child before I even got to 8. But then it was like somebody just flushed me down the toilet to hell at 8. So the fact was, is that, you know what? I talk about going from abandoned to unconditionally loving.
Mm.
And that journey has been a long journey. There are still times I shake my head and think, and just say, thank you, Creator. Thank you for allowing me to get to this point in my life that I can be of service. That's why I have been of service all my life.
Yes. And I love that you say that because there's a quote that I wrote in my first book, which is called Wake the Fuck Up, A Journey from Death to Awakening. But there's a quote in there that I put, which came when you were talking. And I think it's by Helen Hubert. And she says, beautiful people are not born, they're created.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, when we are going out through childhood, we may not have the wherewithal or tools and skills to deal with that hardship or trauma that we went to. But as an adult, we are the only ones who are responsible for our joy, our happiness, our success, our well-being, and our mindset. Only we are, and we can't. I mean, yes, we can get coaches and mentors, but still, the onus is on you to want. If you want that better life, then you have to do the things that will get you in that direction. You are the only one that's responsible, and that's why I think it's so important with the book that I created that people make themselves an object of study. So when people are going through situations like being abandoned or even being approached with sex trafficking, they can be like, oh, this is not right. I trust my intuition that this is going to lead me into the wrong way. So let me take the other route. Let me get help and get out of the situation. It's because people are not trusting themselves because they don't put themselves first.
And I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. I wanted to talk to you about, I'm loving this conversation. We could sit here and talk for hours.
I know.
I'm just enjoying it that
Yeah,
much.
me too.
So I want to talk about your breakthrough method that
Mm,
you use to help people get beyond their thinking, because that's where I'm thinking this is going, because we do more harm to ourselves with our thoughts and our beliefs than anybody else can do to us.
mm. So my breakthrough message is what I kind of talked about in the beginning, where I can see someone, but I can see through them. So they don't have to do anything at all. I just allow and create a space where they're seen, heard, loved, understood, and cared for. And since I've done the work myself, there's no focus on myself. It's just being tuning into that person and their energy. And then as things unfold, then spirit and my sources and guides will show me what it is that the individual needs to work on, what messages that I need to relay to that individual. And then that's how it unfolds. And that's the breakthrough message, because even that individual doesn't even know what is holding them back. And a lot of times when I have sessions with people, they end up crying and they're shocked and disbelief, because how would you know that I was raped or molested or I was beaten at this time, and how can you see those images? I can't explain it. I'm shocked all the time. But the one thing I don't do, I don't ever question what is coming to me,
Mhm.
because I know that that will kind of break the lines of communication. I just have to trust it. And I think in that ability to be able to see what is in the unseen, then that creates that breakthrough, because people now have the root cause of why their life and adulthood the way that there is. And once they realize that, they can see the spider web of how it's connecting to all these different things. So when someone is going through abandonment, they want to pursue a career, but they hit a roadblock. Why? Because they feel when they are able to achieve that career, that they're going to lose it because they're going to get abandoned. And you know what I mean? They don't really see the ties, but it's always about something leaving them. Once they get something, something will leave. And that's how, since I was able to work on myself, that I can help other people break through in areas that they're not aware of.
I evidently am very fortunate because I've had 3 near death experiences in life, not by choice, not by choice.
I have to.
And and I have had very special spirit guides for me.
Mm,
And At first, I was 4 with my first near-death experience, and I can just equate it to if you go to the movie Ghost,
Mm,
and Whoopi Goldberg's sitting there, and she's faking it. She's saying she's talking to these spirits, and there's nobody there. And all of a sudden, Patrick Swayze shows up. He
mhm,
starts talking to her, and she can hear him. And then all these other spirits goes, she can hear him, so they bum rush her. And so that's how it was for me. I had all these spirits. I was 4. I didn't have any comprehension. But over time, when I was abandoned, I had a specific spirit guide come to me. He was male. He was Native American. He was a medicine man and a chief. And he has guided me through my life and made me bulletproof.
mm,
And his name was Geronimo.
mm.
And so the thing is last September, I'm sharing this with you because to go to the next level, but last September, I went to a spiritual retreat and I met a doctor who's in his like late 70s. He's a medical doctor, but he's best friends with Geronimo's great great grandson,
Amazing.
who is 106 years old. And so it's that synchronicity that brought this to my awareness. So I'm an international bestseller author, 3
Congratulations.
times, soon to be 4. And in this book that's coming out, I honor Geronimo and his guidance on my path. And so in that, I love the fact that you took books to be able to be vocal about it instead of doing the physical part, because most people don't realize writing a book is healing.
Mm,
It's being vulnerable enough to share your story and to say, I'm not perfect. Because when I was younger, I was ashamed. I wouldn't let anybody know. I did everything humanly possible. Nobody knew I lived on the streets. Nobody knew the trials and tribulations. Nobody knew. It was those secrets inside of me that were just suppressed. And I was like, no, if I thought my parents were going to do it this way, I'd take a left or a right, but I wasn't going straight. I wasn't going their path. And that served me well. But that was the guidance I had gotten from Geronimo.
yeah.
And so the fact was, as you had brought up spirit guides before. And so now for my breakthrough, I'm honoring the chakras of the planet
Mm,
and their energy vortexes. And Shasta is the root chakra of the planet. It's where you get grounded. It's where you hold your trauma. It's where you hold your pain. It's where you hold on to everything, those secrets. And until you can release yourself from those secrets, and this is why I'm bringing it up because of the breakthrough method, that's how you release it from you. You take that emotion back and create this foundation, because you're not going to take those experiences away,
mm,
but you're creating a foundation. And I love the way that you said that. I just saw it a little bit differently.
mm,
And so I'm going to Maui
mm.
to I'm a drummer. I have drums. I love Native American drums. I've had them for years. And so I'm going to go and drum and heal Mother Earth and humanity, because what we do every day affects the earth individually. And I love that I've connected in your corner, because now I have another corner in my corner, so that the more corners we can get to send out love and light, to send out peace. And because peace is so much more than triumphing over people with power, control, and greed.
Mm.
It's so much more important. So I just wanted to thank you. I loved your breakthrough moment, but that was that was like, I was like, I'm on the same mission now. Literally just retired in May of last year from
Congratulations.
law. Thank you.
Mm,
But in 53 days, I had this podcast up because I now wanted to give ordinary people a voice, because everywhere else they're being censored.
mm.
And so that was a dream come true. And I have been a shamanic practitioner for 45 years.
Oh,
And
amazing.
so the fact is that when I went on this spiritual retreat, I was told to go out there with nothing. I didn't have any of my talismans. I didn't have any of my tools. I didn't even take a drum. They told me nothing, only crystals if you wanted it healed on Shasta. So I
Mm,
said, okay. So I get there. I'm walking around like shirt and pants, and all these other people are very authentically dressed as shamans or energy workers, or we had the Aztec ceremonial dancers there. And I'm like, God, I feel like I'm a part of this, but nobody knows. It's a secret. Again, we're back to the secret. And the Aztec ceremony dancers started dancing, and I got up and danced with them. And they're looking at me because here's this apparent white girl who's getting up and doing the same dances and honoring the four directions and honoring the inside and taking the blessings of it all and speaking light language. And they kind of figured by the fourth day I was kind of special.
Yeah.
So it was enlightening. It was enlightening, but it was humorous too, because we were talking and I had told them, they were debating about plant medicine. They were debating about, different methods in life. And this doctor says, well, they say you don't have to use like peyote or mushrooms or whatever. And it's like I said, it's a choice. I'd rather do natural stuff than fabricated stuff. And look at what and not that I do anything, but I'm not against people doing that because I'd rather him not be addicted to it compared to opioids that creates crime, creates, somebody to try to do whatever they need to do to take care of their addiction. So we've actually created crime by taking away the natural methods of dealing with mental health, dealing with PTSD, dealing with all those traumas in a way that is natural with no effects.
Yeah. And it's amazing that you say that because when you go down this journey, that is only when you really realize how powerful you are as an individual. And see, I haven't, I never need to use any tools or any of those, you know, drugs to get these effects or anything like that. It was all a natural inherent gift that was activated, and I do love Aboriginal culture as well. Like when I was in prison, I had to go through this program in certain levels through my sweat swear ceremonies.
Mm-hmm.
I got my spirit name, which is No Danique, which means East Wind Woman, and I was part of the Eagle clan. So essentially, what that East Wind Woman is just to bring clarity and peace and teaching and healing in this earth. Which is, now when I think about it, it's everything is aligned, and with being a part of the Eagle clan is that ability to have that oversight and that sight that maybe a lot of people are not able to see, and it's a beautiful thing. And I love the drumming that you mentioned it because there's something about feeling that drum on your chest. You know what I mean? It's just so, there's nothing else like it. It's just like, and it makes you feel, and it feels so deeply. So I love that.
So, but yeah, so in sharing that part, I even had a duality in life as I grew up as an adult because I'm law enforcement. It's all about the facts, man. Nothing but the facts, black and white. And here I am, this shamanic practitioner, sending out light and love to even the most hardened criminals.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because they were a hardened criminal, it's because they were a human being. I'm not excusing their bad behaviors. I'm not excusing their actions. It's they're still a human being. And so in that, it's, I mean, I had an experience with a white owl.
Oh.
In fact, I've had this for 35 years. This was one of my first spirit animals.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And it's a shaman with an owl over her head. At Shasta, I went through a cave. And as I'm exiting the cave, there was this natural opening, and I felt energy coming at me in the dark. And I look up, and all of a sudden, it's a white owl that goes up and over my head and out the natural opening. And so when I asked them about it, I said, what's with the white owl? And they said, did you see it? I said, yeah, it flew towards me and up and out over my head. And they said, well, it was honoring you as you were leaving the cave.
Ooh.
It either keeps you out or it honors you as you leave.
Mm.
So with that, that's where I felt my inner child healed.
Mm.
I didn't realize it. I mean, from a kid that never, I thought I knew love. I was married and it was crazy. And within 3 years I was divorced.
Mm.
And then I'd had a 2-year-old child and then I had cancer. And then I finally was still going through me. I had my dog, my horse, my daughter, and my job. And I wanted to be a hermit. All I could think of, hermit, turtle, just go within after that. And so I've now been married for almost 40 years to the
Oh,
same
great.
guy, but being that child that was so traumatized, for a while, I was that traumatized adult.
Mm.
And so I honor you in helping others get beyond the troubled times and helping them get beyond that child that
Mm,
was traumatized, because as we know, if it's not dealt with, they become the same behaviors in our adulthood.
mm. Yes.
So, Carol, 3 tips for my audience. 3 tips.
3 tips.
Just anything general to help.
3 tips is to sit in silence and be able to spend time with yourself to learn about yourself and embrace the challenges that you enter in your life, and that all emotions that you feel, happiness, joy, pain, and struggle, they're all beautiful and they're all meant to teach you a lesson.
I love that. I love that. So here comes to the part in all my podcasts that I ask my guests to sit back, relax, take a deep breath in, close your eyes, and connect with your inner 5-year-old child. What would she say about you today?
That's just giving me a high five, and that I've grown into the person that she dreamed of being. And the connection to source and God is that divine light and love, and to continue to explore and let myself unfold myself to myself as I go throughout this journey in life.
Ooh, I love that. But she's also so grateful you didn't give up on yourself.
Mm,
She's she's so grateful that you didn't say, F it, I'm done.
mm,
Because there were those thoughts, even in prison, because it was the conditions around you that was putting all this pressure on you.
mm,
And that understanding is, she's like, they try to get everybody to do the same thing so you can't snitch on them. And to be able to stand and say no, you become a threat. And she's proud of you that you, even when they first saw you as a threat, realized that you weren't supposed to be there.
yeah. Mm, that's beautiful.
So being an extreme empath, it's what this is one of the other things. Carol, I want to thank you for being here today. You spoke my heart, you spoke my soul, and I love that I can connect with another human being that no matter what side of the fence you're on, no matter what political agenda you have, no matter what your perception is, it's the comprehending of that perception. And it has been a beautiful, beautiful conversation today.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you, Chris, for taking the time and allowing me to be on your platform to share my story, and the ability to help others that may be listening and watching. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Hang on just a second. It takes a special kind of individual to dream their dreams, their thoughts or ideas, and turn it into their reality. Carol Banayos, you have done that. You stepped past your fears. You stayed the course. You had the courage to do the follow through to the end. Carol, you've championed yourself. Now we know who you've become. Thank you for sharing your ideas, your thoughts, your dreams, and your story with us here today.